Well, welcome everyone. As near as we can tell, we've got all of the technology working. We had problems, but I think we're with you now and pleased to welcome you to the Florida Citizens Alliance Congressional District 19 Forum. I'm Pastor Rick Stevens. I'm one of the managing directors of the Florida Citizens Alliance. The Florida Citizens Alliance is a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit organization. We mostly work on K through 12 education reform in Florida, but we also do some of these nonpartisan forums to help voters be informed about the issues and the candidates. And so we're really glad to have you join us today. We're glad to give you the opportunity to meet these candidates. We invited all of the candidates that qualified for the primary, and many of them have joined us. We do have regrets from one candidate. Darren Aquino called earlier today, and he is ill and not able to join us. He sent us his good wishes for all of us, and we thank you, Darren. Wish you could be here, and we want to extend our good wishes to you as well for a speedy recovery and continuing good health. We wish you could be a part of this and are sorry you can't. We want to get right into the forum so we don't spend a lot of time on other things, so I want to begin by having the candidates introduce themselves to you. We give each candidate 1 minute to introduce themselves. We do have a timer that they will be watching, and we're going to try very carefully tonight to give good, succinct answers so we can cover a lot of ground. And we're really glad to have all of these candidates join us. Earlier this afternoon, I put all the names on cards and scrambled them up and drew them out. So it's a random draw who goes first and who goes second. And nobody knows until now, but we begin with Byron Donalds. Welcome, Byron.
Pastor Rick, Keith, how are you guys doing? Listen, thanks so much for hosting this important debate. My name is Byron Donalds, and I'm running for Congress because Southwest Florida is one of the most conservative areas in the country, and it deserves to have a conservative represent them in Washington. I've lived in Southwest Florida for more than 17 years, and I was elected to the Florida legislature in 2016. Outside of politics, I'm a small business owner, I'm a husband, and I have 3 sons. This is going to be a lively debate tonight, and what you're going to hear is everybody, for the most part, is going to try to get you to believe that they're the most conservative person in this race, but the records are clear. I started in politics through the Tea Party movement 10 years ago. I have a proven conservative record during my time in the Florida legislature, and I have a unique ability to help grow our party by taking the message of individual liberty and limited constitutional government to all voters. You see, that's the way you win the political battles against the left. That's the way we as Republicans, we take back the U.S. House of Representatives and we help to reelect Donald Trump. My name's Byron Donalds. I'm running for Congress because I know I'm the conservative that you can trust to represent you in Washington, and I'm asking for your vote.
Thank you, Byron.
Thanks, Byron. Up next, William Figglesthaler. Dr. Fig.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. William Figglesthaler. I first arrived in Southwest Florida 25 years ago as a single father with 3 small children. I was crippled with debt after working my way through medical school and residency. I took out a small loan and opened a tiny practice in Naples. Over the next 25 years, I grew that fledgling practice into one of the largest privately owned healthcare conglomerates in the state of Florida. That is the American dream. It's the same American dream that's under attack by a radicalized Democrat Party hell-bent on driving us into socialism. This is not the time to send weak leaders to Washington. We must send a strong leader who will support President Trump and not just vote for, but champion real conservative issues. I look forward to a lively debate, and thank you for watching. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for joining us. Kristin Mclaughlin.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm Kristin Mclaughlin, and I'm running to be your representative because I'm tired of career politicians and their fake promises. I've been working for President Trump and the Republican Party for the last 5 years, and I have never seen most of these candidates ever volunteering or campaigning for Trump or the party. I'm a lawyer, a certified teacher, and a conservative woman. Florida has 27 congressional representatives. And do you know how many of them are Republican women? 0. That is shameful. As a party, we need to expand and look forward to the future. I best speak to the values of pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and pro-Constitution. Southwest Florida deserves better than career politicians who have termed out and are looking for their next paycheck with DUIs, drug possessions, theft arrests, and financial improprieties. They regulate, tax, and spend like Democrats or rhinos while lining their pockets at the expense of the constituents. I'm the only candidate who publicly pledged within the first few weeks of my candidacy to not accept any special interest swamp money. I'm a Southwest Florida original who will represent your interests with integrity. Please visit ChristyForCongress.com.
Thank you, Christy. Everybody welcome Dane Eagle. Thanks for joining us, Dane.
Thank you to the Citizens Alliance for putting this on. And everybody tuning in right now, thank you for taking the time to do so. I hope you're all staying healthy and well. I'm Dane Eagle. I'm the Republican Majority Leader in the Florida House, and I'm born and raised right here in Southwest Florida. I'm running for Congress to protect and defend our country, our Constitution, and our president, who's under attack today more than ever. During these unprecedented times of COVID-19 and the economic recession and stability that we need to push for, it's clear that we need proven, consistent, conservative leadership, and I'm the only candidate who can offer that. During my tenure as Majority Leader and my time in the House, we've cut taxes by over $10 billion. We protected our water quality. We protected the unborn, defended the Constitution and the Second Amendment, and fought against illegal immigration, banning sanctuary cities and passing E-Verify. I'm the candidate who can offer stability in uncertain times. It's clear CD19 needs some stability. Please vote for me. I'm asking for your vote, and you can learn more at DaneEagle.com. Thank you.
Thanks, Dane. David Holden, welcome to the forum.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I'm David Holden, Democrat running for Congress in the 19th District. I was the Democratic nominee in 2018 and hope to finish the job in 2020. Other than Cindy Banier and myself, every single Republican candidate has pledged abject loyalty to Donald Trump. And blind loyalty to any leader is dangerous in representative democracy. I'm running for Congress because we are on the wrong track, and this administration's utter incompetence and manifest corruption means we need different leadership in Southwest Florida. 50,000 dead Americans, 1 million Americans infected. We are way behind where we should have been and where we could have been with the right leadership in Washington and in Tallahassee. Very happy to be here with you. You can learn more about my campaign at holdenforflorida.com.
Thank you, David. Welcome. And Cindy Banier, welcome to the forum. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Dr. Cindy Banier, and I am a candidate for Florida Congressional District 19. I'm a mom and small business owner, and I'm fighting for our water, our health, and our community. A lot of people ask me, why do you think that you should be running here? What makes you think that a mom and a small business owner has any right to be fighting for the people? And it's exactly the people in this district that I'm working for. For the past 10 years, I've worked with hundreds of organizations around Southwest Florida, talked to thousands of people, written reports, and taken it to leadership. And every time I write those reports, I hand them over to the leaders and they pat me on the head and say, thanks. And they don't do a damn thing about it. I'm here to be the person who is going to fight for the people and also for efficient and effective government. If that sounds like something that you want, please visit me at cindyforswfl.com.
Thanks, Cindy. Glad to have you here. And Dan Severson. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. I'm David Severson, and I am very excited and honored to announce to you today that I have received the endorsement for this race from the National Tea Party leader, Michael Johns. Many may say today that they are real deal, but I am truly the only tested and proven leader with the depth of background and experience to hold that title. As a Top Gun fighter pilot, I served my state of Florida and my country for 22 years, from the Indian Ocean to Washington, D.C., flying my jet day and night in all kinds of weather. After retiring at the rank of commander, I worked in a high-tech startup company and was recruited to run for the legislature. I served 4 years in the majority and 4 years in the minority. 2 of those is the minority whip, where we held back $3.2 billion in tax increases. Florida is my home now 27 years, and I am the only tested and proven leader who can hit the ground running and be your representative and the wingman that President Trump needs in this new Congress. Thank you, and he's doing a great job.
Thank you, Dan. Welcome. And Daniel Kowal. Daniel, welcome. Glad to have you join us.
Good evening, everybody. Well, I'm probably the opposite of pretty much everybody here on this campaign. I'm a street cop, veteran, family man, and I consider myself a constitutionalist. My life is out there. I see the people with their highs. I see the people with their lows. I sometimes am more connected to the people in Southwest Florida because I'm amongst them every day and every night. I truly believe that I represent the people of Southwest Florida more than anybody else running. That 80% of people out there, that silent majority that needs a voice, I believe I represent that. I'm a strong Trump supporter. I will not only stand side by side with President Trump, but I also seek justice for the injustice that was brought to him when I get to Washington, D.C. I'm also a Second Amendment, very strong Second Amendment supporter, pro-life, and small government. Because I believe if government gets out of the way of the hardworking people in Southwest Florida, they will be able to achieve the American dream that a lot of people here on this board have and a lot of other people that we know in our district. So I am destined and determined to represent these people from the ground up and be the representative of Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Daniel. Glad to have you join us tonight. Well, let's get right into the meat of the forum, the questioning from the moderators. We have 2 moderators tonight, and they will run this part of the program. The candidates will each have 1 minute to answer the questions, and we have a timer that they're all watching. The moderators will choose the order of the candidates to answer the questions, and the moderators have sole discretion over the questions they ask. The Florida Citizens Alliance does not tell the moderators what to ask, and we do not tell them what they cannot ask. Many of you sent questions in for the forum, and those questions have been forwarded to the moderators for their consideration. As always, we have given all of the candidates the Florida Citizens Alliance survey that asks them to respond to the issue-based questions of the day and a constitutional survey. The moderators have copies of both of those surveys, but not the candidate answers. They can use questions from those surveys if they choose, but that's entirely up to them. After the last forum that we sponsor, we will publish a voter guide that takes the candidates' answers and puts them all together so that you, the voters, can compare them and make a wise decision. So the moderators are about to begin. They, again, let me remind you, have the sole discretion about the questions. 2 moderators. We welcome Father Michael Orsi. He's the parochial vicar at St. Agnes Catholic Church in Naples. He's active in the community, regularly writes and speaks about the issues of the day. He is a voice of clarity and challenge in the sometimes confused conversation of these days. But perhaps our highest commendation for Father Orsi is that he has a pastoral vision and a pastor's heart. And so we welcome him to the forum tonight. Joining him is Bob McClure. Bob is the president and CEO of the James Madison Institute. It's a Florida think tank located in Tallahassee. They were founded in 1987 and are one of the nation's oldest and largest 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan research and educational organizations. And we appreciate Bob being willing to join us. If I understood correctly, Father Orsi is going to begin with the first question, so we're going to throw it to him. And if that's wrong, he'll throw it to Bob. So Father Orsi, you're up.
Okay, now you're all going to be surprised by this one. What place do you think religion has in the public square? Why don't we start with Mr. Holden?
Thank you, Father. What place does religion have in the public square? Well, as a person of faith, for my own life, my relationship to God is at the center of everything I do. It's the first thing I do in the morning, reach out for that connection, and it's the last thing I do before I go to sleep. But the founders of our nation, very wisely, after much consideration and looking at world leaders of their time and history, decided that there should be a clear division between religion and the public sphere. I don't know any leader who doesn't rely on their spiritual life to guide them in making decisions for their community. But I think this is an area that needs to be separate from the government and needs to be separate from government decision-making. Thank you.
Okay, who would like to follow up on that? Oh, okay. What did we say, Christy?
Kristin McLaughlin, yeah. As a Catholic woman who was actually a Sunday catechist teacher at St. Anne's School, I was a Eucharistic minister, and I also was the program director for Mother Frances de Sales Auxiliary for the Homeless. I'm very devout Catholic. I'm a very religious woman. religion is our most fundamental values that we are based on as a nation. All of our moral values are based on religion and the sanctity of faith. So that said, freedom of religion is our most valued right in the Constitution. So religion is the most premier right that we must uphold. And there is the separation of church and state. But as for individuals, we have the strongest right for religion, and also our moral values, our moral foundations are based on the natural law. And you can even date back to the Magna Carta and its influence that it has on the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Very nice. Who next? Who wants to say something? Mr. Eagle. Yeah, I see you.
Thank you. Thank you. As our founding fathers founded this country, they built a constitution that's based on the belief and the understanding that our rights are inherently given by God, our creator. And that constitution and these laws are also built on Judeo-Christian values. To say that religion has no place in our government or the public square is completely wrong. In saying that, it means that you do not understand where our laws and our constitution come from. And it takes a very deep understanding of those religious backgrounds to understand our constitution and therefore allow you to govern and take an oath towards that constitution. So I very much believe that religion has a moral place and a fundamental place in the background of our government and our constitution.
Thank you. Who's next? Mr. Severson. Mr. Severson, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear.
There we go. Thank you. George Washington, in his farewell address to the Congress and to the nation, made two pillars essential to the freedoms that we now enjoy. One of them was religion. The other was morality. And he said, without those two pillars, we cannot sustain this republic or the freedoms that we now enjoy. And the misnomer that there is a separation of church and state in our Constitution and any of our writings is because of the Danbury Baptist letter to Jefferson that basically said, we're concerned that religion may overtake our government system. And Jefferson wrote back to him and said, this is not, there needs to be a wall of separation so that there is no church-endorsed state or a state that endorses a particular church. There was no establishment of a separation, a hard separation between those two. So I think when we go back to Washington and understand his putting forth the whole two pillars that are essential to our religious liberties and our liberty at large, it denies the whole issue of separation of church and state. It is not in our Constitution.
Okay. Cindy, Banier, Ms. Banier.
Hi, thanks. So I am also a Catholic woman, and I feel it's very important for us to be guided by our moral values. I think that everybody in the United States deserves the right to be guided by their moral values. We do have freedom of religion in this country, and so everybody absolutely has the right to practice the religion of their choice. And what we hate most in the United States is people who impinge upon our freedoms. So this is why we do, in fact, have the separation between church and state, is because everybody should be allowed to practice their religion without the state telling them what's right and what's wrong. And I think that's a value that we need to uphold in this country, and that I will absolutely fight for your freedom and your freedom to practice your religion free from the state. That's what I'm going to take with me to Washington, D.C. on behalf of the people in Southwest Florida.
Okay, who's next?
If you want me to.
Mr. Donalds, yes.
Father, great question. Listen, it's without question that the freedom to practice religion in the United States is sacrosanct to any other right that's in the Bill of Rights. But I think it's important in the world that we're in right now is to understand how we got to this point where it's even a question. This whole separation of church and state, this entire notion was brought back by Justice Hugo Black in one in a Supreme Court decision. He put it in that decision because Hugo Black actually despised the Catholic Church. And what it's created is this false doctrine of a separation between church and state. There is no separation. The only thing that is clear is that because of the writings of the United States Constitution, that the government is not allowed to endorse or ordain a segment of any religion or create any religion. The reason for that is because the framers saw the tyranny of the European kings using religion to actually enchain and take away rights from the people that they had the ability to govern. So that's why we have a freedom of religion here. I think the important question is, are we, whoever goes to Congress, are you going to uphold that? I think my answer is absolutely yes, we're going to uphold your freedom of religion. But let's be perfectly clear, it's there because of a terrible Supreme Court decision by Justice Hugo Black.
Thank you. Dr. Fig, last but not least.
Yes, sir. While the First Amendment gives us the right to practice religion, we do not have state-sponsored religion. The right to practice religion is critically important, and for myself as a practicing Catholic, my faith in God is the compass for many of the decisions that I make, if not most of them. However, the Constitution is what guides us in our legislative abilities, and when I get to Congress, I will be certain that our country that is based upon Judeo-Christian values will continue to support that freedom. Thank you.
I think I forgot Mr. Kowal.
Yeah, our founding fathers basically set our Constitution under Judeo belief when they drafted it. And I agree with several of the other constituents here that it's not a separation by any means. It's just that they don't want any particular state sponsoring or having one particular national religion held over the people of the United States. That they didn't adopt any type of religion or force anybody to be any type of religion. That's what our forefathers were escaping when they came to this country, was the oppression of their religion. They weren't allowed to practice the religion they believed in. So they came to this country knowing that, and that's why they adopted the rules they did, and they made our Bill of Rights and our Constitution, knowing the mistakes they were running from over in Europe. And if you have the right to protest, like a pro-choice group has a right to protest in a public place, you should damn well have the right to pray in that same place, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thank you. You've all answered very well. I'll confer with God later and see who he likes. Dr. Bob, are you next? He's a lot tougher than I am, believe me.
Thank you, Father. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I want to thank Rick and Keith for holding this, and for you candidates in this extraordinary time for joining us today. Rick and Keith, shot you an email just a second ago. If you have a second, if you could look at that while we're moving on to the next question, I would appreciate that very much. We're going to start with Cindy on this question, and then we're going to move through in an alphabetical order to the best of our ability. My question relates to these extraordinary times that we're living in. What is the state's role, and by that, the governor's role, compared to that of Congress's and that of the president's role when deciding whether to reopen Florida's economy or not? Cindy?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Very timely, given the coronavirus pandemic. I think that we have seen this virus be a test of our separation of powers. I would have liked to have seen a more coordinated national strategy, particularly around the supply chains, giving the supplies to our hospitals to make sure that we have the right testing supplies, we have the right PPE, and people are getting served in the way that they needed to be served in order to stem the pandemic. I think that it is correct that the states have the right and the ability to close and open the economy as necessary, but I think that we absolutely need national leadership around the severity of the public health crisis and what needs to be done, and a consensus around the need to protect American lives.
Mr. Donalds, what is the state's role versus the federal's role when determining whether or not to reopen Florida's economy?
Well, listen, under our constitutional republic, it's pretty clear that states have broad authority where the federal government simply does not. Reopening our economy in Florida is frankly going to fall under the decision-making of Governor DeSantis. And I think that this is something that he takes obviously very seriously. I think the president's role is one in support to all of the governors in all 50 states, helping them with federal dollars, federal agencies to be able to get them some of the items that they may need that the individual states may have issues getting on their own. In terms of Congress's responsibility, their responsibility is clear, and it's only through appropriation and some general lawmaking. The issue we've had in Washington is that members of Congress, unfortunately, on the Democrat side of the aisle, took this opportunity to throw a lot of pork into these bills that had to pass in order to provide some of the aid to the American people, because it is government that disrupted our economy, not an action going on in any specific industry. But the decision-making for when Florida reopens is a gubernatorial order that is state government's responsibility. The feds don't have any say. They can't advise to help governors do the right thing for their people.
Mr. Eagle?
Thank you, Bob. Great question. The federal government, through our great president, President Trump, they have a duty to provide guidance to the states. But through the 10th Amendment, it's up to the states to make that decision whether they're going to shut down or whether they're not going to. I think Governor DeSantis has done a great job in assessing the data and making decisions that best fit Florida, not decisions that best fit California, New York, or Georgia, but what best fit Florida. And he decided not to close down prematurely. He waited for that data to say now is the time. And his hands, I think, were frankly tied to make that decision to better protect the citizens. Now, as he's going to make some announcements tomorrow to reopen in baby steps, which I think is a great idea to make sure that we're doing things appropriately, I support him in those measures. He was just with President Trump today and highlighting the things that Florida has done well. We've flattened that curve and actually have beaten what other states have done. So I think it's been a phenomenal job. And yes, what I see happening here and what Congress' responsibility is and what it isn't, is we've seen a government taking with the shutdown, no question about it. And through the Constitution, I firmly believe that citizens who've lost their jobs, who have lost their gainful employment, their pursuit of happiness, they're owed just compensation for that. And when we see a $3 trillion package pass through Congress, and only $300 billion of that is going directly to the citizens, that is cause for concern. I think Congress needs to step up and do a better job, but I commend them for doing and at least trying and having the leadership of our great president, President Trump, and our great governor, Governor Ron DeSantis.
Dr. Fig, how would you compare the governor's role and the state's role versus the federal government's role in terms of determining whether or not to open up Florida's economy again?
Well, the 10th Amendment gives the states the right to decide what's best for the states. And there's no question about it that Governor DeSantis is in charge to make that decision. And I echo the comments of some of my opponents that Trump, as well as DeSantis, has done very well at assimilating the information, which started out as a massive disinformation from China. And then it was only after the disease came to the United States and we got more information that we knew exactly what we were dealing with. There's no question that the long-term economic damage that results from this crisis will by far outweigh any gains that we make because of these shutdowns. There are so many people that are now unable to work. Their liberties are being trampled on in some instances. And I think that what we need to do is be very careful about opening up. And I think that Governor DeSantis will do a very good job of deciding that, as well as coordinating with Congress for funds that are needed to support the people that are being disenfranchised by the inability to work. And we'll move forward from there.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Holden, how would you decide whose role it is to open up the state of Florida's economy, the governors in the state of Florida versus that of the federal governments?
Well, it's clearly the role of the governor to make that decision. And I wish very sincerely that we had a more capable and competent governor in Florida. We waited way too long to shut down. We have done a poor job across the board of communicating directly to our people. We are not testing adequately. The failures at the national level by the Trump administration are reflected by what's going on here in Florida. And you're hearing from the other Republican candidates how dangerous it is when we have this, unbelievable loyalty to one man, and we're not looking at the terrible death toll. 50,000 dead Americans, 1 million Americans infected, 26 million unemployed in the last month, and 13 million people losing their unemployment. The decision on when to open and who should make that decision is clear, but the decision-making is what's at issue here. Southwest Florida has had a string of dilettante millionaire members of Congress. We need to send somebody to Washington who really cares about the working people of Southwest Florida.
Thank you. Mr. Kowal.
The state, the 10th Amendment gives this governor the power to make that decision for the state. Like in the state of Florida, I've had the opportunity to work through 3 hurricanes in the state of Florida where 3 different governors have had to declare a state of emergency. And it's their responsibility for their state, because they are the head of state. I mean, we have 50 heads of states. We're United States of America. When you have foreign countries, you have a head of state, and they run their country. Well, it's just your governor is basically the same exact thing in your state. He is the top executive officer for the state. And it is his duty through the 10th Amendment to control what's going on in the states. That being said, President Trump also has the authority through the Commerce Act, because this is not a normal thing like a hurricane or earthquake or wildfires where you have to shut down a portion of a state or just the state itself. This is our whole country as a whole. And industry travels from across border to border. That falls on the responsibility of our president. And through the Commerce Act, he does have the authority to put out an order to say we need to start these industries again, because it is an interest of the whole United States. But I think he's doing the right thing and leaving it up to the governors for their own states, because they have their finger on the pulse of what's going on in the states.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kowal. I appreciate that. Ms. McLaughlin.
Everyone should have their own pocket copy of the United States Constitution. This is mine that I've had since 2016, all tabbed up and marked up. I am a constitutionalist. I'm a federalist. The 10th Amendment states this is a state issue, and this power remains with our governor, Governor DeSantis. Just looking toward the number of the spread of the virus throughout the nation, every state is going through different numbers, different impact from this virus. In Florida, we have just 30,000, a little bit north of 30,000 affected, with a very low death rate. That said, we have a much higher comorbidity of poverty, of small business being out of work, domestic violence increases. We are in Collier County alone. We've had a 30% increase in domestic violence in Collier County. And in just depression and being in isolation has caused so much harm. And there is a comorbidity to that. So that said, President Trump has shown a remarkable restraint in ensuring and holding back that the federal government cannot infringe on the state's rights to make decisions to open back up the economy. But we need to open up. We need to have opened up a week ago. I've been holding rallies online advocating for this. Small business owners want to open up their business. They want to take their closed sign and turn it over. They want
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Thank you very much. Finally, Mr. Severson, what is the state's role and the governor's role compared to that of Congress and the president's when deciding whether or not to reopen Florida's economy?
The process has been very meticulous, and I think President Trump has done an extraordinary job in shutting down the country to foreign travel to try and capture those that were coming over who were going to communicate that disease over here. He did that and was ridiculed by the left. Governor DeSantis has a great relationship with the White House, and we're fortunate for that. He has not taken the stand of dictating to the nation that we should shut down all of our economy. In fact, he's left it up to the governors, which is perfectly right under the 10th Amendment. And so we've got a good cooperation that's been going on here. Governor DeSantis was very hesitant to shut down the Florida economy, and we have not had a huge impact in terms of morbidity or in terms of death tolls here. But I want to go even a little deeper. That is the 9th Amendment. And in the 9th Amendment, it says the right to travel, the right to move about freely is inherent in the people. And so for the governor to restrict that travel under safety issues is legitimate. However, we need to ensure that those rights in the 10th and the 9th Amendment are kept sacrosanct.
Thank you, Mr. Severson. Thank you very much. I appreciate that answer. Father, I'd like to turn it back over to you for question number 3.
Thank you. Thank you. They've all been very, very impressive. Okay, question. Each year, the federal government gives Planned Parenthood $500 million of our taxpayers' money. Your thoughts? How about we start with Ms. Banier?
Thank you. I'm Dr. Cindy Banier.
Doctor.
And I am actually, thank you. I am a pro-choice proponent. I believe that every woman in this country should have full access to healthcare services that they need when they need it. Now, I believe that it's a personal choice when it comes to freedom. Once again, I am a 100% believer in freedom in this country. And I think that we need to allow people to have that healthcare service. And tax dollars do not go to fund abortions in this country. That's not the case at all. But we do need to make sure that our tax dollars go to where they need to go to advantage the most people through public good investments. And I think that although I personally would never choose to have an abortion, that I think that it's not my place to decide which other American I'm going to make that decision for.
Ms. McLaughlin.
Yes, as a young woman in my prime years to have a child, I can speak to this issue, I think, more than any candidate here. I am pro-life, and life begins at conception. I cannot stress that enough. When it comes to a woman's choice of her body, when she has a child in the womb, her body is no longer exclusively her own. That is just a fact. And we never seem to talk about the freedoms and the liberties that belong to that life in the womb. As for the tax dollars that are going to Planned Parenthood, they do go to abortion because, unfortunately, Planned Parenthood, although it's under the guise of being a healthcare administrative business, it's actually their main form of business is abortions. And I highly recommend watching the movie Unplanned because it makes the argument so clear and so perfectly. To be pro-life is to be pro-woman and pro-freedom.
Mr. Donalds, I'm putting you right in the middle.
It's okay. Listen, Ms. McLaughlin is actually correct in a lot of things, a lot of items of what she's talking about. Whenever you send dollars to an organization, money is one of the most fungible things on earth. It can easily move from account to account. It is without question that Planned Parenthood's primary business is abortion. It is actually interesting that in our political debates, when we get into, we talk about schools, or we talk even about religious situations, religious institutions, that there are fights about federal money or state money going to schools of choice, going to institutions that practice or hold a religious belief. And there's fights from the left about this. But when we talk about actually sending taxpayer money to Planned Parenthood, it's as if everybody should just shut up, sit down, and never mention it again. I do not support that. If Planned Parenthood wants to go about their business model, they should go ahead and raise the money privately because it is such a divisive topic in our republic. And that's simply the way it should be.
Mr. Holden.
Sorry, I muted myself. Thank you. I am a strong supporter of Planned Parenthood and a donor. I believe in their mission. We're getting a lot of bad information here from candidates who don't seem to understand what they do. Abortion is a very small part of their operations. We don't give them money. They contract with government entities to provide a wider range of healthcare services to women, to men, to their communities. I'm a strong supporter of that. I also believe that abortion is healthcare, and that's a decision for a woman to make for her own healthcare needs, just like I get to make my own healthcare decisions. I will not vote for the Hyde Amendment when I'm elected to Congress. If we are paying for healthcare for men, then we need to pay for abortion services for women. Now, if you want to talk about reducing abortion rates, then we can talk about teaching our children birth control and adoption services. Thank you.
Mr. Eagle.
We absolutely need to defund Planned Parenthood. And we actually took steps to do so in Florida. Unfortunately, that was overturned by the liberal courts, which is why it's so important to elect leaders like Governor DeSantis and President Trump, who've had the ability to make generational changes still forthcoming thanks to their judicial appointments. Make no mistake about it, I am extremely pro-life, 100% pro-life. In my time as a majority leader, I've sponsored numerous bills that would protect and defend the unborn. And just this year, we passed a law that would stop young women under the age of 18 from being able to receive an abortion without parental consent. Surprising that wasn't already law in Florida, but that is now law in the land thanks to the legislature, thanks to our service, and thanks to Governor DeSantis. My wife and I are expecting our first child, a boy, here in June, and I couldn't imagine a life without being able to welcome him in. You could expect pro-life decisions from me, and we absolutely need to defund Planned Parenthood.
Mr. Kowal.
I agree 100% that we should defund Planned Parenthood. We know that the money is hard to track where it's going or it's not going. And we know that the primary function of Planned Parenthood is to provide abortions to children that you know, and women that at some point, just for whatever reason, they're looking for a way out of something that they got involved into. I can understand if a doctor is involved in it and this is truly a life or death thing, and that's something a doctor should make that decision. But I don't think 50% of America's tax dollars that's totally against it should go to an organization that they don't believe in. Now, I pose this to other people to believe in abortion. I've asked this question a million times. This is, do you believe there's people who are just exceptionally born a certain way, like a great athlete or a great composer, like Mozart, or like a Michael Jordan in our lifetime? That's a DNA that they're born with. They're not taught that. What if the person that was supposed to cure cancer happened to be aborted yesterday? Maybe that'll never happen in our lifetime. We don't know. I think we should protect all human life. That's my.
Thank you, Mr. Kowal. Thank you very much.
Fig, you're going to close it up for us, Dr. Fig.
Whoa.
No, I got you, Dr. Mr. Severson. I got you.
All right.
Dr.
And then
Fig, and
Dr.
then
Fig.
we'll close with Dan Severson.
Okay.
I got you covered.
Okay.
As a physician, I've seen life at all stages, from birth to death and even just beyond conception. And I can tell you that life begins at conception. As a father, I was tested with a heartbeat at the age of 16 when my then girlfriend was pregnant. And her crazy friends tried to talk her into going to get an abortion, and I stopped her on the way to the clinic. I now have a beautiful 38-year-old daughter and 5 beautiful grandchildren. I will not vote for a budget that will fund Planned Parenthood. This is completely unacceptable that they are using federal dollars to kill babies and basically to politicize and elect officials that will support their task. So no budget will be voted on by me that will support Planned Parenthood. Thank you.
Mr. Severson or Severson? How do you say it?
Severson, sir.
Severson. Okay, Mr. Severson, you get to wrap it up.
Awesome. Thank you. And to me, this is one of the most important issues that I got into politics about, and that is the sanctity of life. When that child is conceived, that becomes a spirit, that becomes a being in that woman's womb. And that being has a right to live. And so for people, in particular, the Supreme Court in 1973, Roe v. Wade, making the decision to say that that is just a pile of flesh was wrong, and it was wrong 200 years before that, and it is still wrong and should be overturned. I'm wondering why we in Florida have not got the fetal pain bill. I'm wondering why we don't have a trigger law that basically says when Roe v. Wade gets overturned, and I believe it will be, that we don't immediately go into the federal reference that says this is a life and it needs to be protected. Planned Parenthood is a butcher factory. If you went to the movie Gosnell and you had the guts to stick it out, you would see what is going on behind the scenes with Planned Parenthood. It's a market industry that needs to be shut down.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Severson. Moving on to the next question, I'll be asking this, and we'll start with you, Mr. Severson, and work our way back. How should we as a nation balance simultaneously protecting public health versus reopening the nation's economy?
I think they're moving in the right direction. They're doing testing where there have been breakouts and moving slower in terms of opening up that area to the commerce side. There are other states like Wyoming, South Dakota, North Dakota have very diverse, very scarce populations who should be full on producing and doing business as usual. So I think in terms of what we had talked about earlier, the governor really does have the pulse of the nation. It's why we put our Constitution together as union of nations, and each of those have the right to say what goes and what does not. And I think President Trump has done a superb job in not overreacting and making sure the governors have their state's best interests at heart. And it really goes down from there to the point where we talk about the individuals in the states have the ability to elect or unelect that governor, and that's where the rights lie.
Thank you, Mr. Severson. Ms. McLaughlin, how should we as a state and a country balance public health with reopening the nation's economy?
Well, the initial quarantine orders were established for the purpose of not overwhelming our hospitals to blunt the curve and to slow the spread. It has been almost 2 months that we have been in quarantine. We have succeeded in that goal of blunting the curve, not overwhelming hospitals, and slowing the spread. President Trump has done a tremendous job in protecting personal liberties. That was one of his main goals running for president. And so with that said, when we entered quarantine order, it was with these exorbitant numbers that we anticipated in deaths in this country once the coronavirus came to our nation. But now that we know that it is not the case and the death rate is actually very low, we need to support President Trump and open back up the country, because individuals know what is best for their own health care, how to protect themselves. And yet again, the comorbidity is actually more deadly than the threat of the virus. It's time to reopen.
Mr. Kowal, how should we balance the idea of the nation's public health versus reopening the nation's economy?
Well, some states, like in the Northeast, their governors basically quarantined everybody. And by definition, quarantine means sick. You only quarantine the sick or the people that possibly have the ability to get this disease that possibly die from it. And we know the frail, the older, the people with underlying conditions. We probably should have quarantined them, asked them to quarantine themselves and be responsible, and let the young people out and work and continue our economy working through this. It's kind of like a pack contamination, they call it, where the young would be out there working, the healthy would get the virus, live through the virus, build immunities to it. And then when the people that are more vulnerable to it come back out into society, they can't get infected because it already run its course with the healthy people. I think they did a little too much when they quarantined even healthy people, because now the healthy people are coming back out and they have no immunities to it. And the doctor could probably contest to that. There's no better scientist or doctor than our immune system. Within days, our immune system can develop immunities to viruses every day that we're exposed to.
Thank you, Mr. Kowal. Thank you very much. Mr. Holden, how should we balance this idea of public health versus reopening the nation's economy?
Public health comes first. We don't have an economy if we don't have healthy people. So I understand the desire for folks to get back to life as normal, though life as normal is never going to be what it was. This virus is going to be with us for a long time to come until we develop an effective vaccine, and that's not going to happen anytime soon. We've got at least 1.5 years to 2 years to deal with this and to deal with continued outbreaks. So I think the governor did a terrible job in dithering on his decision to close the state down. I think it didn't go nearly far enough. I think allowing his donors to dictate decisions like wrestling being an essential service in Florida, this is not using good science and good medical information. So we will open, we will come back from this. It will take time, but we have to put the public's health first.
Thank you. Dr. Figg, how would you balance the role of public health versus reopening the nation's economy?
Well, we would first of all, we'd use common sense. As this pandemic has transitioned over the past couple of months, we now have actual true information about how this virus acts. We know which type of people are at most risk for getting ill with the virus and which are less at risk. So now that we have that information, and also now that we have the PPE and the ventilators and the medical equipment and our intensive care units are not operating at full capacity, we certainly can err on the side of personal liberties, and little by little, we need to get people back to work. We need to open up, we need to get people back to work, but we need to use common sense. Those that are immunocompromised, elderly, or at risk to get ill from this novel virus should stay home, should stay sequestered. We should continue with social distancing, masks, hand washing. We've learned a lot from this. And so we just use common sense, and we've got to get back to work.
Thank you, Dr. Figg. Mr. Eagle, how would you balance the role of public health for our nation with reopening its economy?
This is the time to look to personal responsibility, not to government for the answers. If you look to Lee County before the state shut down, again, the president left it up to the states, and the governor left it up to the counties until his hands were tied, and frankly, he had to make the decision to shut down. If you look to Lee County, where we are, Collier County, people understand what's going on. You give them the guidelines, they're going to abide by them. Social distancing, things like that, those need to be a part of our distant or near, at least near distant future. And people can understand that just by simply telling them. We don't need to look to government to say, you must shut us down, but rather give us the guidelines so that we can abide by them. It's time to reopen, and reopening is happening. As long as we abide by those guidelines that our governor and our president through the CDC are providing us, we're going to be just fine. The social and economic turmoil caused by this economic shutdown could be far worse than anything related to this disease. One death is far too many, but shutting down the economy is going to be far worse in the long run. It's time to reopen. It's time to look to personal responsibility.
Mr. Donalds, how should we balance the idea of public health versus reopening the nation's economy?
I believe we actually already did balance the public's health against this, and now it's definitely time to reopen. When the president came out with the initial orders about social distancing, when Governor DeSantis came out with his initial orders about 50% capacity in restaurants and beginning social distancing, and then even went to a broader order of stay-at-home orders and shuttering and closing down some businesses, that was taking the public's health into complete account. But we're at a situation right now where the data is clear. Our hospital system has capacity. Our ICU, there are plenty of ICU beds for people who will get sick, who may get sick, to get the treatment that they need. There are ventilators that have been created in the past 6 weeks that are actually being returned because the hospital systems don't need them. At the same time, what we do need is we need people to get back to work, because you cannot actually continue the healthcare of the nation if people aren't actually working, earning money, taking care of themselves and their families, providing tax revenue so that government can do its job as well. So it's crystal clear. It's time to reopen. We probably should have reopened already, and I know that's what we're going to do going shortly here.
And finally, Ms. Banier, how would you balance the idea of the nation's public health versus reopening the nation's economy?
Yes. So I think that we have done a terrible job. I think public health is a priority, and we could actually be sitting in the same place that New Zealand is right now with 0 new cases if we had actually taken swift action in the beginning. And that would mean less death, less hospitals being overwhelmed, and less effect on our economy, because it would have been a shorter period of time. I am somebody who has actually lived through a government shutdown because of a pandemic. I lived through SARS in 2003 in Taiwan, and the swift action by the government and the preventative action was what saved people in that country and what actually allowed them to get their economy to come back. We don't have that going on here. We need more preventative measures, and we need testing and temperature taking and contact tracing in order to be able to go back to our economy as normal.
Thank you. Father Orsi, over to you.
Okay, thank you. There is an act called the Equality Act that is making its way through Congress. And basically, my understanding is that it would allow LGBTQ plus people to have the same rights accorded to race in the 1964 Civil Rights Act. How would you vote on this? Let's start with Mr. Eagle.
Thank you. I want to vote against that law. And we've had that bill floating around in Tallahassee for quite a while, and that's not a bill that has been heard. Look, there are unintended consequences. There's no question about it that everybody born under this in this world is granted equal rights by our Creator. There is no question about that. But if you try to put into law or into our Constitution that discrimination is based on, frankly, what I would consider a choice in your life, that is going to have unintended consequences for those individuals. So now if you can discriminate against me or somebody else because of my sexual orientation or my choices, I'm going to have a hard time getting hired. So if that employee down the road is worried about that lawsuit coming against him, he's going to make that decision before I'm even hired, so he doesn't have to make that decision whether or not to fire me. Those are dire unintended consequences. Yes, we were all created equal, but there is a reason for the constitutional equality laws we already have based on disabilities, religion, and other things like that, and this does not fit into that.
Okay, Dr. Banier.
Yes, thank you. I actually think that we do need to vote for more equality. And this comes back down to freedom in our country. We have the freedom to choose the life that we want to live. And we should not be discriminated against by businesses or the government because of it. In fact, women do not even have those same rights. We do not have the Equal Rights Amendment, and it's a problem across the board for all different types of people. And I think if there's one place that we deserve to be protected equally under the law, it's through our federal government laws and the rules that they apply across the country, and then the rules that the states have to abide to as well. We do not have equality. We absolutely do not. Women do not get paid the same, and there is the ability for somebody to be dismissed from their job because of the way that they choose their lifestyle, which frankly is none of your business. And that's what freedom means. Freedom means it's none of your business why.
Mr. Donalds.
Listen, first of all, on the Equality Act, I would vote no. I think the history of why we have a lot of anti-discrimination policies in our statutes, whether it's federally or on the state level, is simple. Because when you're talking about national origin, there was a time period in American history where there was not only discrimination from people locally, but then also from the government with respect to national origin. There was a time where there was discrimination by the federal government, by state governments, because of race. And that's why those things are part of our laws today. There's never been a time in American history where there has been discrimination based upon gender identity or the way you choose to live your lifestyle. This is why the Equality Act should not pass. It is not necessary. We live in the greatest nation in the world, the freest nation in the world, where people have liberty to go, to choose, to do, to grow, to earn money, and to take care of their families. And as long as government is not abridging that, which government is not abridging that, we shouldn't be passing new laws to force people to make a decision personally.
Mr. Holden.
Thank you. One of our fundamental principles is equality before the law. I don't know the details of the Equality Act, but I'm a strong supporter of LGBT rights. If you think that people make a choice to do this, then you need to be better educated on how human sexuality works. We have, over the decades and over the centuries as a nation, as we've gained understanding, added protections for minorities, for people from other nations and other cultures. There is a tremendous amount of discrimination, hatred, and violence directed at the LGBT community, and it is the role of government to protect communities that are under threat.
Mr. Severson.
Yeah, I would vote no. Whenever we have a particular group that feels like they are being discriminated against, they can go to a court of law and ask for a determination on that. And part of this process is when the court made those initial determinations, there were 5 indelible characteristics that really constituted the individual. None of those were qualified under the LGBT when it first was considered. So it was a bit of a change there. But understanding that whenever we take a particular group and we give that particular group more rights than the rest of the group, we infringe on the rights of the majority. And so that's not what our Constitution was based on. Our Constitution was based on equal opportunity for every individual with a recourse to go to the courts if they felt there was a harm and redress was available.
Thank you. Dr. Fig.
I'd like to build further on what Dan Severson said. That additional advantage that people perceive by giving those extra rights to certain individuals or certain groups has a backlash of unintended consequences. What it results in many other societies is that those people are actually discriminated against on the front end. For example, if you have to hire people based upon if you have to give equal this, equal that, it's a perceived equal, and then you're going to have people avoiding giving those people advantages from the front. I absolutely would vote against the measure. It's unconstitutional, and I would vote no.
Okay, Mr. Kowal.
I would vote no. And to add on to where Dr. Fig ended, not only does it creates, if I was a woman or of LGBT community, I wouldn't want the government telling a business owner or a private entrepreneur what I should be paid or not paid, because you're actually hurting yourself in the long run. Because if you have a man and a woman come in for the same job and the woman is more qualified than the man, you gave that business owner an out because he has now the law telling him that he has to pay them an equal amount. So in all actuality, she would make less than what she's probably worth. Leave it up to the people, leave it up to the business owners to make a decision on our own of the quality of the worker that they're going to hire. And yes, if there's some sort of discrimination, that's what the courts are for. That's the third check and balance.
Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin.
To say that the discrimination exists only based on race and that women and the people in the LGBT community don't experience discrimination is farcical. That's simply not true. People all over the world at any given time of the day experience discrimination. But the problem with the Equality Act is if you actually read the bill, the Equal Equality bill that was voted in recently, I think in 2019, in the House, but then shot down by the Senate, it was such a broad bill that actually was creating a detriment for the very people that it was intended to protect. This equality actually provided special treatment and special support to people of the LGBT community, women, people of color, but then the reality is it was actually establishing a dependence on the government for us not to be able to stand as individuals and maintain our personal liberties on our own. As for the LGBT community, that is settled law with Obergeville v. Hodges, but with the equality bill, I would have voted no because of the actual language of the legislation. I highly recommend you read it because it was just terrible when it came to the Constitution.
Thank you. I think we had everybody this time. Very good. Thank you all. Dr. Bob.
I believe this is the final question where we have 1 minute responses, and then Rick will move into closing arguments, for lack of a better term. My final question is kind of a general wrap up. Which current elected official at the local, state, or federal level would you pattern yourself after were you to be elected to this position in Congress? And we'll start with you, Mr. Holden.
Thank you. I will pattern myself after United States Representative John Lewis of Georgia. This is a man who has shown by his every action, every day of his life, what leadership and courage in the face of terrible discrimination, violence looks like. You know, we are at a crossroads in this country. We are either going to move forward together in building a new American dream that is inclusive of all working Americans, or we're going to continue down the road of rewarding donors and the well-connected. I think Congressman Lewis is the person who best exemplifies what leadership looks like, what courage looks like, what spiritual, moral strength looks like, and I would be honored to work with him and to learn from him.
Dr. Figg, which current local, state, or federal elected official would you pattern yourself after?
Well, without a doubt, it would have to be Congressman Jim Jordan. Now, here's a guy who stands for the Constitution. He's not afraid to fight the tough battles. He's a freedom fighter, and I admire him. And when I get to Congress, I'll stand alongside Congressman Jordan and support our Constitution, our president, and push our country forward in the right direction. Thank you.
Mr. Eagle.
President Trump, no question about it. This is a leader that our country has been calling for. We finally got him in 2016, thanks to the American people. People are tired of polished politicians who just say what they need to say and do something else. It's time that we keep electing people like President Trump who are actually going to do something and actually say what's on their mind and not be afraid of the consequences. I have a proven track record in the legislature over the past 8 years, as majority leader over the past 2 years. I will continue to put the people first, and I will fight alongside President Trump in making sure that America continues to be great.
Mr. Kowal.
I'm a Ted Cruz fan myself. I'm a constitutionalist, and I believe he is probably the most vast knowledge of our Constitution and the laws, and with the Supreme Court and case law comes from the legislation that's made in Congress. I truly believe Ted Cruz is somebody to emulate when I get to Congress.
Ms. McLaughlin.
I suppose I'll echo Dane Eagle because President Donald J. Trump is my hero. But the great part about President Trump is that he is not a career politician. His main goal entering and becoming our president was to drain the swamp. And for that very purpose, he was unbought and unbossed by entrenched government figures or special interests. And I find that so inspiring. And President Trump is one of the bravest men this country has ever seen lead it. And I have so much respect for him. But to say something different, I'll say who I would definitely model myself against, and that's the obvious AOC. I suppose I'm the anti-AOC as a young woman who is a constitutionalist for an enduring constitution.
Thank you. Mr. Severson.
I had the distinct pleasure of meeting Vice President Mike Pence when he was a congressman in the Capitol building. And he very much impressed me with his humility and with his kindness and with his ability to communicate essential issues. And as he went on to be governor and now vice president, he is one of the most considerate, easy to work with. And as we saw in the presidential debates, as he had the disagreement with Mr. Kaine on the abortion issue, he did not condemn him. He tried to make him understand the position of a pro-lifer as opposed to someone who is pro-gun. And so I really believe that Vice President Pence is a model congressman, he was a model governor, and he is a model vice president, would make a great president as well.
Mr. Donalds.
You know, I got to tell you guys, that's actually a tough one. And there's a lot of good answers already given between Jim Jordan, President Trump, Senator Cruz out of Texas. I kind of have two, actually. Senator Mike Lee out of Utah and our very own Governor DeSantis. I mean, you're talking about two individuals who came up in politics, not through the traditional route. They weren't party people. They didn't pay their dues and take incremental steps to climb the ladder. They were conservatives, fighters, and believers in our Constitution. And they both served the state of Utah and the state of Florida in two different stints. One as a congressman and now as governor. Exemplary, I think, respecting individual liberty of our citizens. And putting the Constitution first. I think in these trying times with coronavirus, what gets lost is our Constitution, our fight for capitalism, our fights against socialism, frankly, have been proven to be true in the right and a just fight because it is capitalism. It is a free society that promotes the greatest nation man has ever known. So I think I'll have to go with two people, Mike Lee and Governor DeSantis.
Ms. Banier, finally.
Yes, thank you. So as far as local leaders go, this district is pretty heavily Republican, and I find myself often philosophically opposed. So I look for my leadership to somebody I spent time with on Capitol Hill, and that's Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan out of New York. He was somebody who was a statesman who really cared about people across the United States and worked together across the aisle. And I had worked with him in the Senate Finance Committee, and he was the founder of evaluation, and that's actually my field of practice. I do evaluation, and I work to help organizations become more efficient and effective. And I look to him in guidance on how I can take that same lesson to craft bipartisan legislation on Capitol Hill. Otherwise, I will say, currently speaking, I look to some of the strong women that are serving both in our House legislature, like Anna Escamani and Ayanna Pressley and all the other squad members. I think that women who speak their mind and not just follow along with what they think is going to get them the most popularity is really the most important thing.
Thank you. Well, before I turn it over to the father for a closing quick statement, I want to thank each of the candidates for being on here today. I know this is kind of an interesting way to go about it, but I think it's been fascinating. There's so many issues we didn't get to: education, healthcare. You know, there were a whole list of things that the father and I had to trim down over the course of our preparation for this this event. But I want to thank you all. I want to thank the Citizens Alliance for the opportunity to be here. And if we at the James Madison Institute can ever assist you in anything that you do going forward, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you all very much. Father, any closing thoughts?
I want to thank all of you too. You handled yourselves beautifully. I hope that we can do this again. It was very, very enlightening, and we certainly do, as Dr. Bob said, have so many more questions that we would like to ask you, because believe it or not, the questions we ask you are also to help to educate us and to educate the citizenry out there that's listening to you. And you presented your arguments, you presented your cases very, very well. So I wish you all the very best of luck. I hope that the Florida Citizens Alliance will allow us to do this again as we get closer to the primaries and to election time. We can further refine the issues that you stand for and to help people make the right decision to elect the best man, best woman. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Father Orsi, and thank you, Bob. We really appreciate your help. You were excellent moderators, and yeah, I'm all in. Let's do this again sometime. I really appreciate the candidates and their forthright answers and their willingness to be candidates. You know, we've been doing these forums for a while now, and one of the things that we've learned is that it's not easy to be a candidate. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of personal sacrifice, and no matter whether we agree or disagree on all of the issues, we agree that we appreciate people being willing to put themselves out there and to be candidates and participate in our republic. So thank you so much. And we do look forward, and we plan to do some more of these. We hope you all join us for that. We want to remind the audience that the two surveys I mentioned earlier, the issues-based survey and the constitutional survey, are available on our website. The answers aren't there from the candidates yet. That'll be later. But if you'd like to see those surveys, we'd encourage you to go there and watch for our announcements. We'll do some more of these forums and hopefully help all of us to learn more about the process and about the people that are involved, because we all want to have a robust conversation and well-informed voters. So thanks again for joining us.
Rick?
Yes.
Rick, you want to give everybody a 1-minute closer since we have a few minutes?
I do. So we're gonna do that. I did draw those names out again, and let's start with Dan Severson.
Professor Rick and Keith and Bob, thanks so much for putting this together. I think it's great for our constituents to be able to have a view of who's running for office, to see what they stand for, and make an informed decision. For me, the Constitution is on the forefront. I am a Christian, a strong family man, and the Constitution embodies those things our founders really embraced for a solid government. I have not and will not violate my oath to defend the Constitution. It's too personal for me. It's been defended by the blood of patriots, and my friends are some of those. As a strong Second Amendment supporter, I co-sponsored and helped conceal carry. That's one of the things that's a passion of mine. Pro-life is a passion of mine. And I would encourage people, as you are looking through the candidates, go to my website, Dan Severson, that's SeversonForCongress.com. Take a look. I would be honored and humbled to have you take a look at it, gain your support, and vote for me on August 18th. May God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
How about David Holden?
We're still on?
We are. How about David Holden?
Thank you. Thank you for having us and for hosting this wonderful forum. And thank you to the other candidates for participating. Not every country has the same rights and the same freedoms we do to stand for office and to choose our own leaders. And I know all of us here take that very seriously. It is clear that whoever represents the parties in the general election, that Southwest Florida in the 19th District, the voters here are going to have a very clear choice about the way forward for our country and our community. I believe that we are in grave peril. We have thousands and thousands of people in our district who cannot put enough food on the table or keep a decent roof over their head. We have a job to do in building a new American dream that includes all working people. That's what I am committed to leading as a candidate and as a member of Congress. I ask for your support. I ask for your vote. Please go to holdenforflorida.com to learn more about our campaign and what I stand for. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Fig, you're up next.
Ladies and gentlemen, with so much at stake, the 2020 election is no time to be standing on the sidelines. There is a whole slew of career politicians in this race simply looking for a taxpayer-paid promotion. They'll all have crafty explanations about why they take money from special interests and then trample on the Constitution. As a self-made businessman, physician, father, Christian, and philanthropist, I cannot be bought. I will stand with President Trump, and I will champion the values and initiatives that we all hold near and dear. I will answer only to you, the Southwest voter of the conservative voters of Southwest Florida. If you are tired of candidates who promise anything and everything to get elected and then sell out your values to the highest paying lobbyist, then we have a home for you in our campaign. Please visit us online at drfigforcongress.com and join our team of America First Conservatives. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Dr. Fig. We appreciate that. Byron Donalds.
Oh, well, first of all, to the Florida Citizens Alliance, thank you for putting on this this debate. It was very informative. To my fellow candidates, thanks for joining. I wish that everybody did. I know that Mr. Aquino is not feeling well, but I wish the other people were here to do this, because it's important that the voters of Southwest Florida hear from us all. It's important that they hear from our vision. It's important that they hear what we plan to do, what's in our mind, what's in our hearts. I came up into politics really through the Tea Party movement. I was a regular person working a job, taking care of his family, but I was passionate about America. My time in the legislature has served standing for constitutional principles, fighting for education reform, the things that I campaigned on. And going to Washington, it's going to be clear. It's going to be standing on our Constitution, supporting our president, but also expanding our party. We need new voters in the Republican Party. We need to actually stand for capitalism and our Constitution and free markets. And I'm the only candidate in this race that can get all those things done. And that's why I'm asking for your votes. So find out more about me at byrondonalds.com, and also follow me on Twitter at Byron Donalds. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, Byron. Let's turn now to Dane Eagle. Dane.
Thank you to the Citizens Alliance for putting this on, and to the moderators and to everybody who's tuning in. These are unprecedented times and unprecedentedly trying times. And it's not a time to elect someone who's untried and untested and unknown. I'm a born and raised Southwest Floridian. I'm the Republican Majority Leader in the Florida House. I have a proven track record of effective, conservative, and consistent leadership. And more so than that, I'm running to defend our president, our Constitution, and our country. I am the only candidate who had the opportunity just last December to fly on Air Force One with our president. And he's proven that he is consistent in putting the American people first. And time after time, he asked, what can I do more for Florida? And I finally said, Mr. President, what can we do for you? I made a promise to him that myself and other state leaders will deliver Florida for him this November, because it's clear that he is putting us first. We need to be there for him. If you elect me in November or in August in this primary, I will fight alongside our president for the next 4 years in ensuring that we are delivering results to this country and to Southwest Florida. You can learn more at daneeagle.com, and I'm asking for your vote.
Thank you, Dane. Let's turn now to Cindy Banier. Cindy, so glad you could join us.
Yes, and thank you for hosting and moderating and coordinating this, and thanks to all the other candidates for coming. It is important to hear everybody's voice. You know, I am somebody, I'd say I'm a mom and a small business owner. I'm also part-time faculty at Florida Gulf Coast University. So if you really want somebody who knows our government, why not get somebody who teaches it to the next generation? I also am somebody who's a fighter. So I am a former professional boxer. And so if you really want somebody that's going to go toe-to-toe, literally toe-to-toe, and get through it all, I'm somebody who can do that. But I also have a proven track record of bipartisanship. I just led a statewide coalition of candidates who were fighting to make sure that Florida elections were fair and that voters had a choice in the fall. And that was just over a couple of weeks. So although I am a Democrat and I work off of progressive principles, and I will always be proud of what I believe in, I will work with people to get things done and fight for what's right for Southwest Florida. Please go ahead to my website. Also, all across social media, SWFL Mom 2020, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. I think that's a first. I don't think we've had a fighter like that before. So thank you for joining us. Daniel Kowal. Daniel, thanks for coming, being a part of this. We'd like to hear from you.
As you can tell, I'm definitely not a politician. I am a street cop veteran that feels that I've been watching our government lean to the left over these years. I served in the military under President Ronald Reagan. I remember we trained to push back communism and socialism. And it's hard to believe after all those sacrifices we did that almost 50% of the members of Congress now lean that far left. That it scares me. It really scares me. And it scares me for the future of my children, your children, and everybody else. I've also met President Trump several times. The difference is I met him when he was getting out of limo to get on Air Force One, because I was on a motorcycle going 100 miles an hour next to him, protecting him in his motorcade back and forth from his events. And he is a great man. And we'd all be foolish on the Republican side to not say we would stand with President Trump. I'll definitely stand with President Trump, and I'll definitely stand and have that same commitment for the silent majority of the people in Southwest Florida that need a person that sees not only the political side of it, but the actual human side that they suffer through every day, and what their future can be like if they send a man like me to Washington, D.C. Public service is my life story.
Thank you, Daniel. Really, again, glad you could join us. Happy to have you here. And finally, Kristin Mclaughlin. Christy, thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Florida Citizens Alliance for holding this debate. This debate was exemplary of the beauty of democracy. I'm Kristin Mclaughlin. It is my honor, so humbling, to run for this seat to serve Southwest Florida. This is my home, and the people of Southwest Florida are my family. As a lawyer, I am the most equipped to defend the Constitution on a legal basis, as we saw was so important given the impeachment circus that occurred earlier this year. We needed a Southwest Florida representative in DC, not a DC representative in Southwest Florida. Southwest Florida needs a representative who is not a rhino, who will put the people first, and who is not going to use the seat as a con for political clout. Before I entered this race, when I looked at all the other candidates, I did not feel any confidence in any of the other candidates in this race. That's unfortunate. So I entered this race, and I promised to never bring scandal. I promised to never sink into the swamp. I will not betray you. I will not make promises to support President Trump and then rescind that promise the moment it no longer suits me. America is the greatest country in the world, and we are going to keep it that way. We are going to keep Southwest Florida great. My website is christyforcongress.com.
And thank you, Christy. Again, thanks to all the candidates. Thanks all of you for watching. We will be back with some more of these forums, and we are really eager to have you join us for those as well. But tonight, that's it. And we're finishing up, and we want to wish everybody a good night. God bless America. God bless Southwest Florida, and God bless you. Thanks again for joining us. Good night.